You ungrateful brat. The crystal glass hit the pillar just inches from my head, exploding into sharp, glittering fragments that skidded across the marble floor. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. Gasps erupted from the crowd of overdressed family friends, extended relatives, and leech-like business associates gathered under the glittering chandeliers of the Layton family estate ballroom. Some turned away awkwardly. Others chuckled behind their champagne flutes. But I didn't flinch. I just looked at my mother, hair perfectly pinned, lips pulled into that brittle smile she always wore when pretending to love me, and I said calmly, "I already told you. I'm not signing it over." That was the trigger. Her face twisted. Dad stepped forward, face red, tie undone, pointing a finger that shook with rage. "You think you've earned this? You wouldn't even have that inheritance if your grandfather hadn't taken pity on you after your third failed job, Melanie." I could feel 150 pairs of eyes on me. Even the violinist had stopped mid-note. "You're nothing but a damn disappointment," he seethed. "A failure. You've never brought an ounce of pride to this family, and now you're going to rob your own parents of what's rightfully ours." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I smiled. It wasn't fake. It was quiet, cold, and soaked in the kind of clarity that only comes when a decade of humiliation finally fractures into resolve. Because what they didn't know was that tonight wasn't a celebration. It was a countdown. One I had orchestrated. One they'd never see coming. Behind me, my best friend Camila gave a subtle nod. She had her phone in her hand. Recording. Streaming. Ready. "Enjoy the music," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Because this will be the last time the Laytons throw a party in this estate." That shut them up. My father's laugh was a sharp, joyless bark. "What the hell are you talking about?" But I was already walking away. Past the shocked faces, past the gawking distant cousins, past the servers who knew more about me than my parents ever had. Out the double doors. Into the night, where my revenge was waiting. And it was beautiful. 3 years earlier, I'd been sleeping on a futon in a Brooklyn apartment with mold on the ceiling and a space heater that only worked when kicked. I was jobless, heartbroken, and most importantly, alone. But then came Grandpa. Grandpa Walter Layton, the black sheep of the Layton Empire, who wore denim to five-star dinners and called my mom a plastic vulture to her face. He was the only one who ever saw me for me. When he passed, they celebrated behind closed doors. Everyone thought they'd finally get the full control of the estate, the Hampton House, the vineyard in Oregon, the trust fund, until the will was read. And a name nobody expected had been written in gold ink. Mine. Melanie Layton. Executor. Beneficiary. Majority shareholder of the Layton Family Trust. There was a clause no one paid attention to, because they thought it'd never matter. One that stated, "The estate shall be irrevocably transferred to Melanie Layton upon her 30th birthday unless found legally incompetent or proven to be coerced." And guess who turned 30 just a week before the party? I didn't need their permission. But they didn't know that. Not yet. The day after the glass incident, I walked into the family's corporate office in Manhattan, Layton Holdings Tower, wearing a crisp navy suit and heels sharp enough to slice through decades of entitlement. Camila walked beside me, holding a leather folder tight against her chest. Inside was everything. Every signature, every timestamp, every silent approval my grandfather had tucked away for me. My father's assistant, Greg, practically leapt out of his chair when he saw me. "Melanie? You don't have a meeting booked today. Mr. Layton is." "I'm not here to meet," I said, brushing past him. The elevator ride to the 44th floor was silent, but my thoughts were loud. Years of being mocked at family dinners, being told I was emotional, directionless, the family burden. Years of their fake smiles, their charity invitations I was only invited to if someone else canceled. The night my mom said, "Maybe you shouldn't wear that dress. It makes your arms look large." That day, I held every single insult like a blade, and I was ready to cut the cord. When I walked into the boardroom, my father looked up, startled. My mother was seated beside him, flipping through real estate brochures with her reading glasses perched at the end of her nose. "You need to leave," she said sharply, not even making eye contact. "We're preparing an investor call." I tossed the folder on the mahogany table. "Actually, you do." "What the hell is this?" Dad snapped, grabbing the documents. "Your retirement package," I replied. He laughed. My mother looked up. "Excuse me?" "Effective this morning, the board voted. I now control 64% of the trust's voting rights. Your positions have been dissolved." Their faces, once suntanned with inherited privilege, drained of all color. "This is a joke." I turned to the stunned board members in their suits and silence. "Oh, it's not." Camila leaned down and pressed a remote. A slideshow appeared on the big screen behind me, emails, contracts, clauses, and a short video clip of my grandfather, time-stamped, confirming everything. "I try to talk to you like a daughter," I said, voice calm but hard. "But now I'm speaking like what you always wanted me to become. A Leighton. Just not your version." My father stood there, eyes darting from document to document, sweat building at his temples. He wasn't used to being powerless. For decades, he'd sat at the head of the Leighton table, barking orders, puffing cigars, and mocking anyone who didn't carry the family crest in their blood like a battle scar. Now he just looked like an aging man in a suit too expensive for what little authority he had left. This is insane," he stammered. "Your grandfather would never give you this much control." "Maybe not if I'd stayed the girl you remember," I replied. "But the woman I became? That's who he trusted." My mother hadn't moved. She just sat frozen, one hand gripping the brochure for a villa in Monaco. "You're bluffing," she said flatly. "You don't have the experience, the respect. The board would never side with you." Camila stepped forward, clicking the remote again. Another document flashed across the screen, the signed consent from the board's most senior members, 3 of whom had reached out to me personally after my grandfather's death, quietly expressing concern about my father's reckless handling of funds. "The respect you talk about?" I said. "It's built through truth, not fear. And this board's been afraid for too long." She opened her mouth to speak again, but I cut her off. "And one more thing, regarding the estate." My father looked up sharply. "What about it?" "It's sold." Silence. "What?" "I sold the family estate. Last week. Papers were signed. Funds are in the trust's new account. I'll be donating a large portion to causes Grandpa believed in. Ones you mocked. Scholarships. Addiction recovery. Art therapy for veterans." "You sold our home?" my mother snapped, standing now, voice shrill. "That's been in our family for generations." I finished, "Yes. And you treated it like a trophy. A backdrop for your little shows. But to me, it was a cage. And I'm done living in one." I turned to walk out, but paused at the door. "Oh, and about that party last night? The reason you all looked so confused when the waitstaff disappeared halfway through?" They stared. They were mine. Hired actors. The champagne was sparkling cider. No alcohol license. That celebration? A stage. A trap. To make sure I had every humiliating word, every thrown glass, every laugh captured on high-definition security footage and broadcast live to the rest of the trustees. My mother sank back into her chair, mouth open. My father looked like he might fall over. "You really thought you could shame me in front of a crowd again and still come out on top?" I smiled. "Just enough to make it hurt. Congratulations. You just burned the last bridge standing." I drove to the estate for the final time that evening. The once bustling mansion was now eerily quiet. The staff had already packed their things. The gardener who used to sneak me apples when I was little gave me a gentle wave goodbye as he stepped into his truck. I stood in the center of the great hall, breathing in the scent of old wood, lavender polish, and the lingering ghosts of too many hollow dinners. Then I walked out the back door and down to the stables. Because one more thing remained unfinished. Hidden beneath a false panel in the barn was a small trunk, one Grandpa had shown me in secret just months before he died. Inside were dozens of handwritten letters, old journals, and a flash drive. Camila was already waiting for me there. "You sure you want to release it all?" she asked, sitting on a hay bale, holding a USB reader. I nodded. Let's show the world what kind of legacy the Laytons really tried to build. Within hours, social media had clips of my mother's tantrum, my father's meltdown, and most importantly, scanned excerpts from internal documents proving the misuse of funds, bribery, and bullying tactics used to silence dissent within the company. Some screamed forgery. Others started resigning. By midnight, #LaytonLegacy was trending for all the wrong reasons. And me? I didn't flinch. Because for the first time, I wasn't surviving their world. I was rewriting it. The media storm that followed wasn't something I feared. It was something I had counted on. By sunrise, major business outlets were already covering it like wildfire. Layton heiress exposes family scandal in viral estate showdown. Read the headlines. Some praised me as brave. Others called me calculating. But I didn't care about either side. I cared about justice. Not revenge. Not anymore. Justice. I arrived at the Layton Holdings Tower just after 7 a.m. The security guards at the front, who'd once refused to let me into the building when I brought my father's forgotten cufflinks, now stood up straighter, nodding at me with respect. Upstairs, I walked into the boardroom and called an emergency session. "I want a full audit of the last 10 years, I said, voice firm. Every deal, every shell company, every offshore transaction that my parents, or anyone connected to them, had their hands in. One of the board members, a gray-haired man named Prescott who had always aligned himself with my father, cleared his throat. "Melanie, some of these findings could reflect poorly on the company. Do you really want to expose this much? Especially now that you're in charge?" I looked him in the eye. "If something's rotten, you don't paint it gold. You tear it out before it poisons everything." Silence followed. Then slowly, reluctantly, they nodded. By the end of the week, I had fired 3 executives, dissolved 2 subsidiaries, and launched an ethics initiative that had HR calling me a maniac behind closed doors. But I didn't care about their whispers. I remembered being the silent girl at parties, sipping flat soda in a corner while the same people now cowering in front of me had laughed with my parents at my expense. I was done being that girl. Camila stayed close, always steady. "You're changing the culture," she said one night, sorting paperwork at my penthouse apartment downtown. "But you're also scaring people." "Good," I said. "Maybe fear will keep them honest." But then came the letter. A thick cream envelope, hand-delivered with no return address. Inside were 2 things. A photo, taken years ago, of my grandfather, Walter, signing something. A notarized document showing a revocation clause, one that stated his will could be contested if proven he had been manipulated in the final 6 months of his life. It was dated just 8 days before he passed. And at the bottom, in neat pen strokes, Uncle Martin's signature. I hadn't spoken to Uncle Martin in years. He was the quiet one, the family's supposed moral compass, who'd vanished to Maine and lived on a boat. But clearly, he'd been planning something behind the scenes. Something dark. When I called him, he answered on the 3rd ring. "I was wondering when you'd reach out," he said, his voice calm. "You've stirred quite a mess, Mel. Why are you doing this?" "Because you're dismantling something that took generations to build. It's corrupt. It's family." "No," I said, my voice ice. "Family doesn't throw glasses at you. Family doesn't laugh when you're bleeding. Family doesn't lie to strip you of your dignity." He sighed. "This isn't personal. It's business." "No," I said. "It's both. And I'm not afraid of you." "We'll see," he said, before hanging up. That night, I stood alone in the darkened estate one final time. The sale would finalize in 48 hours. The chandeliers were off. The grand piano sat covered. And in the silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Doubt. But it passed quickly. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every daughter silenced, every woman mocked for saying no, every person who walked out of a room after being humiliated and dared to rise instead of crumble. I was the woman they tried to bury. And I had become the storm. 2 days later, on the morning of the estate's final transfer, I stood at the edge of the grand balcony, overlooking the sprawling green lawns my parents had once paraded on like royalty. The fountain below still ran, the same one where I used to toss pennies and make silent wishes as a child, mostly that they'd finally see me. They never did. But now, they would remember me. Not as the silent daughter. Not as the family failure. But as the one who refused to kneel. Behind me, footsteps echoed across the marble floors. I didn't turn around. Melanie. Uncle Martin's voice cut through the crisp morning air like a saw on old wood. You don't have to go through with this. I turned slowly to face him. He looked older than I remembered, grayer, thinner, but his eyes were just as sharp. The same eyes my grandfather once said hid knives behind politeness. Funny, I said, folding my arms. You didn't say that before sending that revocation clause. He stepped closer. It wasn't meant to threaten. It was leverage. To give you a way out before this gets ugly. It already got ugly, Martin. The day my mother threw a glass at me in front of 150 people and called me a disgrace for not handing over something that was never hers. He said nothing. I walked toward him slowly. You know what I realized? The Leighton name never stood for legacy. It stood for control. You all just used tradition as a leash. I was protecting the family's future. No, I said softly. You were protecting your slice of it. He stepped back. Now, I continued, voice clear and unwavering. You have two options. You can walk away quietly, or you can try to fight me and watch me expose every offshore account, every backroom deal, every favor Grandpa covered for you over the years. I have it all. You know I do. His face paled. He didn't deny it. I was just trying to keep the empire from crumbling, he muttered. No, I said again, walking past him. I'm letting it fall. Because empires built on fear deserve to turn to ash. The estate transfer took place that afternoon at a private lawyer's office. Camila sat beside me, holding the final documents. The buyer, a non-profit organization focused on rehabilitation and women's shelters, shook my hand with gratitude. We'll turn the estate into something meaningful, she said. Are you sure this is what you want? I looked down at the line waiting for my signature. The same line they tried to force me to erase with guilt, rage, and humiliation. Then I picked up the pen. I'm sure. With a final stroke, the estate was no longer a symbol of their power. It was mine, and I had set it free. The fallout came fast. Headlines exploded. Leighton Estate to become Women's Recovery Center. My father's allies turned their backs. My mother disappeared from social media. My uncle tried to sue, but the documents Grandpa left me were bulletproof. The court dismissed his claim in under a week. But the moment I knew I had truly won, it came quietly. One evening, a young woman knocked on the door of my new downtown office, a girl in a thrift store coat with bruises under her eyes and a tremble in her hands. She clutched a newspaper article about the estate. You made a place for people like me, she said, barely above a whisper. And suddenly, everything fell into place. That estate had seen so many empty parties, fake toasts, and cruel jokes. Now it would house survivors, dreamers, fighters, people who wouldn't just be seen but heard. Months later, I returned to the estate one last time, just before renovations began. The ballroom had already been stripped bare. No more chandeliers. No more marble-topped buffets. I stood in the exact same spot where my mother had called me a failure and thrown a glass at my head. The sunlight filtered through the windows now. It was quiet, peaceful. I smiled, turned slowly, and walked away for the last time. Because that place wasn't mine anymore. And I didn't need it to be. I had built something stronger than inheritance. I had built myself.